Hey, everybody. What is up? It's Amy O with Life Redesigned, where we grow through what we go through. Today, I'm going to be starting a series called Truth Talk, and today is part one. And I've done a lot of business trainings for all of you guys, and I thank you for all the feedback and all that I've been hearing. I'm so glad that you guys are enjoying those. And for the next 4 weeks, at least 4 weeks, if not more, I'm going to be actually rolling through what I call a Truth Talk series. And that's going to be a little bit more of getting to know me and the driving force behind Life Redesign, the driving force behind why I'm doing what I'm doing, why I'm sharing what I'm sharing, and a little bit of, background, trials, errors, learning from my mistakes type of thing. And, a lot of you guys have heard me talk about humanizing your brand. And a long time ago when I was really, at my brick and mortar studio for a very long time, and every single day working really hard, and I was in the grind. I knew everybody. Everybody saw me. I was humanized there. And now that the studio is, where it is today, my business, my brick and mortar business is where it's at today, and I've entered into the social media world. What I'm realizing is that there's a lot of you that actually don't know me very well. So here comes my truth talk, and I'm really excited to bring you part one of this series. And today I'm going to be sharing with you just a little bit about how I got here. Who is Amy? Where did I come from? What am I even doing? Why do I own a pole dancing studio? What's up with that? And why am I now in the online space? So let me just give you just a quick history of just a little bit about me. So I grew up, I have 3 siblings, and I grew up in a very loving home. My parents are amazing. I have so many fun memories with my siblings. And we grew up on a golf course, and I knew from a very small age that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like, it was just ingrained in me. And we would do things like we would go find golf balls on Sundays at the golf course. We would take the cart around and we'd have to kick people off the course. And I loved being in charge. And then we'd find golf balls in the woods, and then we'd wash them up, put them in egg cartons, and we'd go sit on the 5th hole of the golf course that I lived at, and we'd sell golf balls. I'd walk around the golf course, and I'd pick up the cans and take the cans back for money. And then I'd take that money and go to the garage sales in my neighborhood and buy my mom something for Mother's Day or for her birthday. And, we would have penny carnivals off the porch. So I would find things in my room to try to sell, and I'd bargain with people. So at a very young age, I really knew that I had drive, that I had work ethic, that I, wanted to do something great, that I wanted to be great. Like, I don't remember a day that I didn't have that instilled in my soul, in my DNA. So as I grew up, I really got interested in being, I really got interested in athletics. In the neighborhood that I grew up in, my sister had a lot of friends, my brothers had a lot of friends, and I was a little bit of a loner. Like, I didn't necessarily have, girls my age to hang out with. And I had a couple friends that were in the neighborhood that we could kind of talk together a little bit and hang out, but they were like in an extended neighborhood that weren't super close to me. So I found myself just kind of dreaming. Honestly, I would find myself dreaming a lot and wondering, what I could do and what I was going to do with my time. And I always had this burning desire to fit in, I guess you could say. So I found that within sports at a very young age. I loved playing sports. I loved dancing. I loved playing softball. I loved anything that I could get my hands into and work really hard and grind and be coached at. I just loved that. That was my jam. That was my thing. I worked very hard in school, moved on to go to college, and ended up playing softball at a small NAIA school here in my city. And about 3 years in, I was studying business. I was, doing 2-a-day practices for softball. And I really kind of took note of my life. Like, this isn't where I want to be. This isn't what I want to do. And I left college, and that really excited my parents. Insert just kidding, super not excited my parents. They, in their eyes, it was like a complete failure. I'd been the only kid that was going to college at that time. And I left and I was like, I'm moving to Chicago, and I'm going to go be in network marketing. That's what I'm going to do. So I moved to Chicago, and I did just that. I entered into a network marketing space. Back then, network marketing. So I was 20, 19, 20 at the time. And network marketing back then was where you would close for thousands and thousands of dollars. Okay. A lot of you know the network marketing space right now. And it's a very safe industry. It's very ethical. There's so many great products that are tested and tried and true, and systems and all the things. That was not the industry back then, or at least the company that I was with back then. So, to make a long story short, within that era of my life, I moved to Chicago, joined a network marketing company. I was closing sales for like $10,000, speaking on stages with 300 people in the audience, sharing with them about products I was barely using. And what I found is that the behind the scenes part of the leaders of that company, not the company itself, but the leaders of that company, were running things very unethically. So that was my life at the time. And when I made the decision to walk away, the hardest thing to see was that I was very disowned. So again, when I talk about network marketing back then, we talked a lot about 97% versus 3%. I remember, we used to say, oh, the 90%, 97 percenters, they're working a job, and the 3%ers, we're building a business and we're entrepreneurs. And the great thing about that era in my life is I learned how to work. I learned a lot about people. I learned a lot about personalities. I learned a lot about work ethic. I learned how to understand what a grind is, and discipline, and be around millionaires. And that was really my first taste of something like that in the entrepreneur world. What I found very quickly is how unethical that whole thing was. And when I walked away and stood up for my values and stood up for my truth, I was extremely disowned by my leaders, people that I had really truly been there for a lot of events in their life. In fact, I was so disowned that I was supposed to be in a wedding of our top leaders, and I was no longer invited to be in the wedding when I decided to leave the company, because I challenged their values and I challenged their morals, and I asked really hard questions. When I was not a millionaire, to people that were millionaires, saying, why are you guys doing this? Why is this run this way? What is happening here? And I didn't get answers. And I left because I didn't get the answers from people that I was looking up to. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm not going to keep promoting this. I'm not going to this goes against what I believe in. This goes against my values. And this is not right. What they're doing is not right. And I stood up for that. I left. I was kicked out of the wedding. I was disowned, and I never talked to those people, most of them still to this day. So going through that transition from having such a tight-knit family within that industry to going and being on my own was like, I felt like I was just on an island all by myself. I was 23 at the time I left the industry, I think. Yeah, 23 at the time I left the industry. And the only thing that I knew to turn to was drugs and alcohol and a heck of a lot of sin. That's what got me through the pain of everybody deserting me and leaving me. And I found a local restaurant, became a server, started waiting tables, and really got into a crowd of people that at the time were doing the same thing that I was. So it was fun. It seemed okay. And that really led like a really strong path through my 20s. And, really what I discover, and obviously what I can see now looking back 20 years later, is I can see that in my head and in my mind and in my heart at the time, I was doing all of those things because it was fun. And what I can see now is I was just trying to cover up the pain, right? So those of you that have had any sort of addiction, or you've had any sort of, life that you've turned away from, or you've really like just done everything that you can to cope, I can look back and now see that those were choices and decisions and people that I was around to try to help me feel better. And also, those of you that have ever had any sort of experience with that, we know where that leads us, right? It doesn't make us feel better. It doesn't help us feel better. So I met a lot of really wonderful people. Most of those people are actually still in my life today during that time. So while it was a very crazy time of drinking and drugs for me, the friendships and relationships that I built were so solid because I did find people that I could really count on. So I left this area of being really deserted and feeling alone and not wanted and shoved to the curb. And then I got to meet some really incredible people that some of them to this day would do anything at the drop of a hat for me, and we've been friends for 20 years. So within that era of me kind of like navigating, through finding what I was doing, I partied really, really hard when I left network marketing, made a lot of like wink, wink, really great decisions after being, in drugs and alcohol and doing all the things in that era of my life. And finally decided, you know what, I'm going to switch jobs. I'm going to go into a career that is going to give me a little bit more stability. And I began working in sales. It was a really rough transition. I mean, there was a lot of like, wow, I've really got to grow up if I'm going to be part of this Fortune 500 company. So I went from working at like a local restaurant and bar to working at a very solid Fortune 500 company as part of their sales team. And I'll never forget, because when I interviewed for the position, the number one requirement before anything else was that you had to have a college degree. And I didn't. And remember when I said this, or those of you guys that know me, I like to really go against the grain. I applied anyway. And I was like, these people are going to hire me even though I don't have a college diploma. So I went in, I went through the interview process. And as they looked at my resume in interview one, they're like, oh, so you graduated from, this college? And I said, no, I didn't. I've got one year to go. They're like, so you don't have a college degree? And I said, no. And then I made it to the second interview and they asked me the same thing. And I made it to the third, and I made it to the fourth, and I made it to the fifth, and then they hired me. And I'll never forget meeting the girl that they hired side by side to me at that time, which is now what still to this day, one of my best friends in the whole entire world. And she turned to me and said, what do you mean you got hired without a degree? That was the first question that they asked me. And I was like, yeah, well, So I just went for it, and I had the confidence, and I got hired into that company, and I entered into a sales career that I loved. It was fun. It was exciting. I'll also never forget working for this company. And oh gosh. So for a little while I transitioned with, working at the restaurant and the bar, and then kind of also working in sales, because I had to kind of have an overlap of when we were getting paid and that kind of stuff. And it was like, you're so used to being up until 4 a.m. because in the restaurant industry and the bar industry, that's what time you don't go to bed till 4 or 5. Well, I had to be at I had to be at work at 7 a.m. And I'm like, what are people doing up at this time? Which is funny to think about now because I'm up at 6 a.m. every day. So that transition was super tough, and really kind of feeling like I needed to step into a new role was interesting, but I loved it. And the company that I worked for was very structured. And again, if any of you that are listening to this, me, like you just know that this is how I operate. So we had a very strict dress code for sales: black, white, navy. You had to wear nylons, and this is what your shoes needed to look like. And I broke all of those rules. I was wearing hot pink. I was wearing purple. I was wearing blue. I never wore nylons because I was like, I'm not wearing nylons. That doesn't fit my personality. And I hit my sales numbers, and I continued to work for that company, and I continued to wear pink, and I continued to wear blue and purple. And I don't know, I just made it work. So against the grain is where I went with that. And so I had a lot of fun within that company. And after a couple of years, I was ready to move on. And I was invited to open a prestigious nightclub in Grand Rapids by a couple of friends of mine that I loved and adored, and still love and adore. And I was offered to be part of the grand opening of that. And that was really exciting to me. It was really safe to work for a Fortune 500 company and to have that steady paycheck. And I did work hard, and I was I was a top sales leader in my area, and I hit my numbers in that job. But there was something in me that when I heard that there was an opportunity for me to work in something and start new from the ground up, like that was really exciting for me. So I got offered the position. I said yes, and I left my super conservative, safe job to go into something in a position that did not exist, to work for a prestigious nightclub that back then in Grand Rapids, that was, let's see, that was 2005-ish, I think, somewhere around there, was not like the grandest thing of where our city was at the time. So we did just that. We opened our doors. We talked about the grit behind who we were and the brand that we were. And I worked within that brand, and I helped open that club, and I promoted that club, and I met so many amazing people. It was so fun. Fast forward a little while forward. Let's see, some time went by. Oh my goodness, that time in my life went fast. So a couple years, a year and a half or so, around there, our club did not make it. So I was really in a position that I had to decide what I was going to do. Was I going to go back into that safe job? Or was I going to kind of stay in this industry? And, there's those of you that are in the bar and restaurant industry, it's fun. I mean, I know a lot of people are like, oh, like I don't know. I loved it. I loved meeting people. I loved serving people. I loved the memories I made. I loved the staff. I can say for the most part, like all the staff I worked with, I just met some really great people. So I don't know if I just got like crazy, weirdly lucky or something, and everybody else just like hates that industry, but I truly, truly loved it. And I'm truly grateful for that time. And I also think anybody I really think they should have it as a college course. I think you should have to work in the industry because I think it teaches you a lot about yourself. I think it teaches you a lot about how hard you can work, that you have to work hard because that's how you make money. It teaches you how to talk to people and how to relationship build because that's also how you make money. And it teaches you how to work as a team because you don't work by yourself in a restaurant or as a bartender. That's not how it works. You've got to connect with the other staff. You've got to work with the food runners. You've got to work with a chef. You've got to relay communication. You've got to make a drink if the bartender's busy and you're expecting them to make your drink. So you've got to pivot a lot in that industry. And I really, truly think that it teaches you a lot. So kudos to you. High five for all of you that work in that industry. I love it. And I love that you're there. And thank you for all that you do. You guys are rock stars. So I was really at a position where I needed to decide what I was going to do. And again, I really loved the idea of building. That was just, doing that, even though the nightclub didn't make it. I loved the grit and the grind and the hard work behind that and the branding piece of that. I really enjoyed that. So I moved next door to another bar and restaurant, and I worked there I worked there to help build that brand and connect that brand and promote that brand. And again, I loved it. And then I, again, just kind of came to a crossroads. The industry kind of came to a crossroads where I was really considered to be able to do something different. And at that time in my life, I had strayed back to that crazy era of where I was before I went into sales. I really kind of like circled back around to that. I really, I was feeling like I didn't have direction. I was feeling like I was like off the rails a little bit sometimes. And I was just kind of really trying to find my way. So it was kind of like I had my way for a little while, and then it was kind of like off the rails I went because it was like, well, this isn't quite the right fit of like where I thought I would be. So that relationship ended, and I went back into sales to try to have a little bit of structure and to try to kind of figure out if this was where I wanted to be. And as I was transitioning into that, the guy that I was dating at the time, we were together for about 5 years at that time, 4 years at that time. I found out that I was pregnant. We found out that we were pregnant. And I wasn't sad about it, you know? It wasn't something that I was ready for, but I was really, really, really excited to be a mom. And I couldn't wait to be a mom. I couldn't wait to go through this period of my life and really have that purpose. And during that time, as I separated from the restaurant industry, that also kind of gave me a little bit of a focus to redirect my life and really turn my life around. And what I did is had an opportunity to go back to school. So I went back to school and finished my degree while I was pregnant and graduated. So I now have a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration and Communication Arts from a local college here, same college where I started. So you're never done until you're done. You can always go back. I went back 10 years later. So 10 years after I left college, I went back while I was pregnant with no job and I finished my degree. So within that, found out I was pregnant. And after I had my son, I was working in sales. I actually went through my interviews being almost 5 months pregnant. I hid my belly during my sales interviews because I didn't want the male managers to know that I was pregnant because I didn't want that to be a factor in them hiring me. So I was very I wore like this big, I wore a big like a suit jacket over my belly and just discussed my numbers and where I was at with the company before. And I got hired with this company and insert a few weeks later, probably like a month later, we ended up having to work. Part of our training was to work in the factory piece of this company. And the factory is like, doesn't have air. It's really hot. This was in the middle of summer. My belly was showing and I was like, okay, I can't like work in here for 8 hours while I'm pregnant with no drink breaks and like pull these long hours in the heat. So I eventually had to tell my male manager. The company and my managers were extremely supportive of me being pregnant and where I was. And I finished out that job being one of the top sales reps in the entire company, in the entire country. I loved it. I was great at it. There was still something that felt like it was missing. Remember that whole piece where I was like, oh, I love, like, it was nice to be stable, but I still had this burning desire to like build and do something. And I wasn't sure what that meant. So taking that entrepreneurship from when I was little of like, that still kind of just stuck around. And I knew I was good at sales, but I kind of said to myself, I'm just not sure if this is where I want to be forever. You know, is this what I'm going to want to do? So I decided I'd look back into the fitness industry and kind of just see what was out there. And maybe I could just kind of be in the fitness industry, teach a workout class, something like that. Okay. So don't forget, this was 11 years ago. Okay. Boutique fitness did not exist. We didn't have things like pole dancing and boxing and Orange Theory and circuit train. We didn't have any of that. Okay. We had like gyms, the YMCA, like big name gyms. That was it. So when I looked into the fitness industry, I thought, I don't want to be a personal trainer. Kind of feel like everyone's doing that, you know? So I Googled weird fitness certifications. And I will never forget this. And as the Google search came up, I looked at the certifications and I'm scrolling down and I literally said out loud, I was like, no way, no way. And I'm looking at pole fitness certifications and I'm like, this is not a thing. I mean, come on. And if this is a thing, how have I never heard anything about this? Because this sounds super cool, really fun. And I live in a small city. There's got to be one here. So I opened a new window and kind of thought, okay, where is the studio here? Because I'll just go teach there. So I'll like go get certified and then I'll go teach at the studio in Grand Rapids. Well, I found out there wasn't one. So then I thought to myself, well, I'll go get certified and then I'll come back and I'll just teach a couple classes. So I'll come up with like a cute, catchy name. I'll teach a couple classes and should be fun, right? So my son was 1, and to my boyfriend at the time, I said, hey, so I think I'm going to go to Chicago this weekend and get certified in pole fitness. And he's like, what? I'm sorry. Come again? And I was like, yeah, it's like this thing I found online. Like you get like certified, you get like a certification and it's pole and then you can like teach it and it looks really cool. And there's a studio out there and I really want to go. And he's like, okay. And I was like, I think I can do like 2 certifications at the same time. So I'm just going to go like Friday through Sunday, and then I'll be certified when I come back. And then I can put a pole in the basement, and then I can practice. And he's like, whoa, like, what is going on with you? So eventually it was like, okay, go for it. So I paid a couple $1,000s to go get a couple certifications, drove to Chicago, and walked into this space thinking I was going to a fitness class. Okay. So this is the beginning journey of me finding the pole fitness industry. And those of you that know where I am, fast forward just a little bit, and you know that my company is about to turn 11 this year. So back up 11 years ago, this was my very first piece and my very first having eyes on my very first experience with pole fitness. So there is a little bit of background about me. I'm going to keep you guys on the hook and keep you waiting for Truth Talk Part 2 next week. And I'm going to share with you what happened at the certification. And I'm going to give you a hint. I knocked something off the wall, and it was very, very hilarious. I've got some funny stories to share with you about how I got into this industry, where this industry led me, and some stories along the way. So tune in next week. We're going to talk about Truth Talk Part 2 of how Amy O entered into becoming a certified pole instructor. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, Amy, I'm sure it was so easy. You look like you do everything with ease. You guys, listen up. I am here to tell you, I did not do this with ease. I'm serious. Okay. I was knocking things off the wall, super uncoordinated, didn't have answers to any questions. I didn't know what I was doing, and I can't wait to share it with you. So join me next week. We're going to go through Part 2. Can't wait to see you. We're going to learn more about all the things of how this brand was born, where I'm at today, how Flirt Fitness is still alive today, some more how-tos and some good stories coming up next week, and I'll see you then.